There is someone on your mind right now. You know exactly who they are. Maybe it is a friend you used to talk to every single day. Maybe it is someone you loved deeply. Maybe it is a family member, a colleague, or someone you thought would always be there. And at some point, the messages stopped, the calls stopped, the silence crept in, slowly at first, and then all at once. And now you sit with your phone in your hand, staring at a conversation that has gone cold, asking yourself the one question that refuses to leave you alone: why? Why haven't they reached out? What does it mean? What are they thinking? What are you supposed to do with this silence? That question is not just a passing curiosity. It is something that keeps people up at night. It creates anxiety, self-doubt, confusion, and sometimes even heartbreak. Because silence from someone who used to be present in your life is not just an absence of words, it is a message of its own. And today, we are going to decode exactly what that message means using real psychology, real science, and real human behavior. Because the truth might surprise you, and it might also set you free. Stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you will understand something about human nature that most people spend years trying to figure out. And once you understand it, the silence will never have the same power over you again. Welcome to Psychology Wisdom, the channel where we explore the deepest corners of the human mind to help you understand yourself and the people around you better. If this is your first time here, welcome. You are in the right place. And if you have been with us for a while, you already know that what we do here is different. We do not just skim the surface. We go deep. Before we begin, if this kind of content speaks to you, please take a moment right now to like this video. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to this channel and helps us reach more people who need to hear this. Drop a comment below and tell me, is there someone specific you are thinking about right now? Someone whose silence has been sitting heavy on your heart? Share this video with someone who needs it, because I promise you, someone in your life is asking the same questions you are. And if you have not subscribed to Psychology Wisdom yet, do it now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss another video. We are building something special here, a community of people who are committed to understanding the human mind at the deepest level. And if you truly want to support this channel and everything we create here, you can show your love with a super thanks right below this video. Your support is what keeps this work going, and every single one of you who contributes makes a real difference. Now let us get into it. Part 1. The Psychology of Silence. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of human communication. We have been conditioned to believe that silence means nothing is happening. But in psychology, silence is never empty. It is always full of meaning. The question is, what kind of meaning? When someone stops reaching out to you, your brain immediately begins searching for an explanation. This is not weakness, this is biology. Your brain is wired for social connection more powerfully than almost any other drive you have. Human beings evolved as deeply social creatures. Our survival, for hundreds of thousands of years, depended entirely on our ability to maintain relationships within our tribe. To be cut off from the group meant death. So when your brain detects a disruption in a relationship, a sudden silence, a lack of contact, it treats it the same way it would treat any other survival threat. It goes on high alert. It starts obsessing. It starts running through every possible explanation it can find. This is why the silence of someone you care about can feel so physically painful. It is not just emotional. Research in neuroscience has shown that social rejection and physical pain activate many of the same neural pathways in the brain. When someone goes quiet on you, your brain experiences it as something that genuinely hurts. And when you are in pain, you want answers. You want to understand. You want the pain to stop. But here is what psychology tells us. The meaning behind someone's silence is almost never what we assume it to be. Our minds, when anxious and searching for answers, tend to default to the most threatening explanation available. We assume the worst. We assume they are angry. We assume we did something wrong. We assume they no longer care. We assume the relationship is over. But the reality of why people go silent is far more complex, far more nuanced, and far more human than any of those assumptions. Let us walk through what the silence might actually mean and the truth behind each possibility. Part 2. They are fighting their own invisible battle. One of the most common and most overlooked reasons why someone stops reaching out is that they are struggling with something deeply personal that has nothing to do with you. Depression is one of the most powerful silencers of human relationships. When a person is in the grip of depression, even the simple act of sending a text message can feel like an enormous and overwhelming task. Depression does not just make you sad, it drains your energy, your motivation, your sense of connection to other people, and your belief that reaching out would even matter. People who are depressed often withdraw from the very relationships that could help them, not because they do not care, but because the illness tells them that they are a burden, that no one really wants to hear from them, that it is better to disappear than to pull others into their darkness. Anxiety works in a similar way. Social anxiety, in particular, can create a paralyzing fear of reaching out. The person imagines all the ways the conversation could go wrong. They overthink what to say. They worry about being judged or rejected. And so, instead of sending a message and risking that rejection, they say nothing. The silence is not indifference. It is fear wearing the mask of distance. Grief is another powerful silencer. When someone is going through a significant loss, the death of someone they love, the end of a relationship, the loss of a job or a dream, they often go inward in a way that can look to the outside world like they have simply disappeared. They are not absent from you specifically. They are absent from the entire world while they try to process something that has shattered them. Burnout, chronic stress, and overwhelming life circumstances can also cause people to go quiet. When someone is drowning in responsibilities, work pressures, financial stress, family crises, their social connections are often the first thing to fall away. Not because those connections are unimportant, but because there is simply nothing left in the tank to give. They are running on empty, and even the act of maintaining a conversation feels like one more thing on an already impossible list. The next time someone goes silent on you, consider this: what if their silence is a cry for help that they do not know how to send? What if they are disappearing not because you matter less, but because they are barely keeping themselves together? Part 3. They have changed, and they do not know how to tell you. Another powerful psychological explanation for prolonged silence is personal transformation. People change. It is one of the most fundamental truths of human life. And sometimes, the person you were close to has grown into someone different, someone with different priorities, different values, different interests, different ways of seeing the world. And when that happens, they sometimes pull away not out of hostility, but out of a kind of quiet confusion. They do not know how to explain who they are becoming. They do not know if the old connection can survive the new version of themselves. And so instead of having a difficult conversation, they simply go quiet. This is especially common in young adulthood, a developmental period where psychologists note that people undergo enormous identity shifts. The friends you had in your early 20s may find that by their late 20s, they are almost entirely different people. Their world has shifted. Their sense of self has shifted. And sometimes that means that relationships that once felt central and vital begin to feel like they belong to a chapter of life that has already ended. This does not make the silence painless, but understanding it through the lens of personal growth, rather than personal rejection, changes everything. They are not pulling away from you because you failed them. They are pulling away because they are in the middle of becoming someone new, and sometimes that process requires a kind of solitude and separation that even they do not fully understand. Part 4. They are waiting for you. Here is something that might challenge everything you have been assuming. Sometimes the person who has gone silent is waiting for you to make the move. Reciprocity is a fundamental principle in social psychology. People are often reluctant to reach out first because they are afraid of seeming too eager, too needy, or too emotionally exposed. They have their own fears of rejection. They wonder whether you actually want to hear from them. They tell themselves that if you cared, you would have reached out by now. And so they wait, and you wait. And the silence grows and grows, not because neither of you cares, but because both of you are waiting for the other person to take the first step. This dynamic is incredibly common, and it is responsible for more fated relationships than almost any other single factor. Two people who genuinely miss each other, who genuinely want to reconnect, who genuinely care, simply failing to make contact because each one is too afraid to go first. The psychology here is rooted in ego protection. Reaching out first makes you vulnerable. It opens you up to the possibility of being ignored, rejected, or receiving a lukewarm response. And the brain, always trying to protect you from pain, whispers, "Do not risk it. Wait. See if they come to you." And then both people protect their ego, and both people lose the connection they actually wanted. If there is someone in your life right now whose silence has been weighing on you and you have been waiting to see if they will reach out first, this might be your sign to simply reach out. Not because you are weak or desperate or because you care more than they do, but because sometimes the bravest thing you can do in a relationship is choose connection over ego. Part 5. They are processing something between the two of you. Sometimes the silence is specifically about the relationship, not as a permanent ending, but as a period of processing. When two people have a conflict, a misunderstanding, an unspoken tension, or a moment of hurt, some people respond by talking it out immediately and directly, and other people respond by pulling away. They need space to process what happened, to figure out how they feel, to decide what they want to say. They are not trying to punish you. They are not playing games. They are simply doing internally the work that you might do out loud. Psychologists who study attachment theory identify this pattern most clearly in what is called the avoidant attachment style. People with avoidant attachment tend to withdraw when they feel overwhelmed by emotional complexity in a relationship. Their instinct, when things get complicated or intense, is to create distance, not because they do not care, but because emotional closeness, when it feels too intense, triggers a kind of internal alarm system that sends them retreating inward. For someone with an anxious attachment style, someone who craves closeness and reassurance, this withdrawal from an avoidant person can feel devastating, like abandonment, like rejection, like the relationship is over. But understanding the psychological mechanics behind it reveals something important. The withdrawal is not a verdict. It is a coping mechanism. It is how that person manages their internal world. And with patience, understanding, and the right kind of communication, the silence can end, and the relationship can continue, often deeper and more honest than it was before. Part 6. The relationship has naturally run its course. Now we come to the possibility that is hardest to sit with. Sometimes, when someone stops calling or messaging you, it is because the relationship has genuinely reached its natural end. Not because of a dramatic falling out, not because of a terrible betrayal, but simply because life has carried two people in different directions, and the connection no longer holds the same weight it once did. Psychologists call this relationship entropy, the natural tendency of relationships to lose energy over time unless they are actively maintained. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some connections are seasonal. Some people come into our lives to serve a specific purpose, to teach us something, to carry us through a particular chapter, and then they move on. And this is not a tragedy. It is a natural part of the human experience. The sociologist Mark Granovetter distinguished between what he called strong ties and weak ties in social networks. Strong ties are the deep, close relationships that require regular contact and mutual investment. Weak ties are the more peripheral connections, acquaintances, former colleagues, old friends that drift in and out of our lives. Research shows that most people can only maintain a limited number of strong ties at any given time. When someone's life changes, a new city, a new job, a new relationship, a new family, they naturally reallocate their emotional resources. And some connections inevitably shift from strong ties to weak ties and eventually fade. This is not about you not being worthy of their time and attention. It is about the fundamental, unchangeable reality that human beings are limited. We cannot maintain every connection we have ever had at the same depth forever. It is not possible. And accepting this, truly accepting it, is one of the most emotionally mature things a person can do. Part 7. What your reaction to the silence reveals about you. This is perhaps the most powerful part of everything we are exploring today. Because while we have been focusing on what the other person's silence means, there is something even more important to understand: what your reaction to their silence reveals about you. How you respond to the silence of someone you care about is a direct window into your attachment style, your self-worth, and your emotional patterns. And understanding this is not just interesting, it is transformative. If the silence makes you feel immediately worthless, like you have done something terribly wrong, like you need to apologize, even when you cannot identify what you are apologizing for, this might be telling you something important about how conditional your sense of self-worth is. If your value as a person fluctuates based on whether or not someone is actively reaching out to you, then your sense of worth is anchored not in yourself, but in the behavior of others. And that is an incredibly unstable and painful place to live. If the silence makes you furious, if it triggers anger and resentment and the urge to punish them for their absence, this might be revealing something about your own fears of abandonment and the defensive behaviors your mind has developed to cope with those fears. If the silence makes you feel desperate, if it sends you into a spiral of overanalysis, reading old messages, checking their social media, running through scenarios, this might be pointing to an anxious attachment pattern that goes back much further than this particular relationship. None of these reactions make you broken. All of them make you human. But here is the invitation: rather than focusing exclusively on what the other person's silence means, what if you use this moment as an opportunity to understand yourself more deeply? What does this silence bring up in you? Where does that come from? What does it tell you about the patterns you carry from your past into your present relationships? This is the kind of inner work that changes your life. Not just your relationship with this one person, but your relationship with every person you will ever know. Part 8. What psychology says you should actually do. So now that we understand the many layers of what someone's silence might mean, what do you actually do? Here is what psychology recommends. First, resist the urge to catastrophize. Your brain is going to offer you the worst possible interpretation of the silence. It is going to tell you that this person hates you, that you are forgotten, that the relationship is over, that something terrible has happened. Before you accept any of those stories as truth, recognize them for what they are: your brain's anxiety response trying to prepare you for the worst. The worst is rarely the reality. Second, reach out once. A single, warm, low-pressure message. Something that opens a door without putting a demand on them. Something that says, "I have been thinking about you. I hope you are okay." No pressure to respond right away. This respects their space while still honoring the connection you have. And then you wait. And you release the outcome. You cannot control whether they respond. You can only control whether you showed up with openness and love. Third, turn your attention toward yourself. Use the energy you have been spending on analyzing their silence and redirect it toward your own life, your own growth, your own joy. This is not denial or avoidance. It is wisdom. The people who are most naturally magnetic, most naturally connected, most naturally at ease in their relationships are the ones who are not waiting for others to validate their worth. They are too busy living their own full, rich lives. Fourth, practice what psychologists call non-attachment. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you hold the relationship with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. You care deeply, but you do not attach your well-being to the outcome. You love them, but you do not lose yourself in the waiting. This kind of love, open, generous, free, is the most powerful kind there is. And fifth, know your worth. Truly know it. Not in a shallow, affirmation poster kind of way, but in the deep, cellular, unshakable kind of way. The kind of knowing that does not waver when someone goes quiet. The kind of knowing that says, their silence does not change who I am. It does not diminish my value. It does not define my future. I am whole with or without this response. Part 9. The deeper truth about human connection. Here is the deepest truth that everything we have explored today is pointing toward. Human connection is one of the most beautiful and most complicated things in existence. It is never perfectly consistent. It is never perfectly reliable. Even the people who love you most, the ones who would do anything for you, will sometimes go quiet. They will sometimes disappear for a season. They will sometimes fail to reach out in the moments when you need them most, not because you do not matter, but because they are also just human, also carrying weight, also struggling with their own invisible battles. And you will do the same to others. There will be people in your life who wonder why you went quiet, who replay your last conversation searching for clues, who wait for a message from you that does not come. Because life is complicated, because we are all carrying more than we show. The antidote to the pain of silence is not to demand that people be perfectly present. It is not to keep score of who reached out last or count the days since someone messaged you. The antidote is a kind of radical, generous compassion for the people in your life and for yourself. A compassion that says, we are all doing the best we can with what we have. Sometimes the best we can do looks like silence, and sometimes silence is not the end. Sometimes it is just a pause before the next beautiful chapter begins. The people who are meant to be in your life will return. Not all of them, but the ones who are truly yours. They will come back in their own time, in their own way. And when they do, you will understand that the silence was never the whole story. It was just a part of the story that needed to be told. And that is the truth that psychology, human behavior, and the deepest wells of human experience all point to. Silence is not rejection. It is not verdict. It is not the final word. It is a moment in an ongoing conversation, and what you do with that moment matters. If this video moves something in you, if it gave you clarity you did not have before, or if it helped you see someone's silence through a more compassionate lens, please share it. Right now, before you leave, share it with someone who is sitting with the same questions you were sitting with before you pressed play. Because that one share might be the exact thing they needed today. And if you got value from this, please like this video. It is the simplest thing you can do to tell us that this kind of content matters to you, and it helps Psychology Wisdom reach more people who need it. We read every single comment that comes through on this channel, so drop one below right now. Tell us, has someone's silence ever turned out to mean something completely different from what you thought? Has the silence ever been your own? Your story might be exactly what someone else in this community needs to hear. Subscribe to Psychology Wisdom if you have not already, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new video. We release content that is designed to go deep into the parts of human psychology that actually change the way you live, love, and understand yourself and others. And if you want to go even further in supporting this channel, you can show your appreciation with a super thanks right below this video. Every super thanks contribution supports the creation of this content and helps us keep doing what we love, bringing you the psychology insights that actually matter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving your attention to something that asks you to think deeper and feel more fully. That says something about who you are. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep being curious. Keep growing. Until next time, this is Psychology Wisdom, and your mind is worth understanding.